Okay, greetings and welcome to another edition of the Pan-African Community News Network. You're with me, Brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu, and hopefully I'll try and see if I can bring up Sister Oleander. Are you there?
Greetings, everybody. Hope everyone's well.
Ah, excellent. Okay, so apologies for running a little late. We're having a few gremlins behind the scenes. Unfortunately, one of our pieces of equipment isn't working quite smoothly, so some of the slides might be off kilt, so please bear with us. But as ever, we should be live on YouTube and Facebook. Please feel free to drop us a line, a comment to let us know that you can see us and hear us okay. That's always helpful as we move forward. Got a jam-packed program for you as ever, and like I said, please bear with us as I move slides and stuff and things don't work out. We still haven't been able to sort out this little technical gremlin yet, but I'm going to move to the next slide, and hopefully it has changed. I can't see the change on my screen over here, so I'll try and do that here. This is really weird. I'm hoping the screen has changed, and it's a remember slide for Elder Randall Robinson. Now, Randall joined the Ancestors last Friday at the age of 81. He was one of the members and the founders of the Trans Africa, which is a Washington-based organization. Now, he'd been hospitalized for a little while in a hospital in St. Kitts, that's in the Caribbean, with a serious infection, unfortunately. After a valiant struggle, he joined the Ancestors. He moved to St. Kitts, actually, which is an interesting backstory, after he became disillusioned with living in America. He moved in 2001, but he was known to journalists not only as one of the founders of, or the founder of Trans Africa, which was established in 1977, but also as the younger brother of the pioneer broadcast journalist, Max Robinson. And he was a massive advocate for reparations, who in 2000 wrote the book, The Debt That America Owes to Blacks, talking about African Americans. So he joined the Ancestors just a few days ago. The next libation we want to pour for, and I'm hoping the slides are changing. If the slides aren't changing, then please, I think I'm going to rely on Sister Oleander, because I can't see anything from you on the other side to let me know. The next libation is one for Flight Sergeant Peter Brown. He joined the Ancestors at 96.
Sorry, it didn't change.
It hasn't changed.
No, we're still on Randall Robinson.
Oh, okay. This is going to be an interesting session today, with slides being a little bit out of sync. I'm not sure what's going on there. Thank you for letting me know. So hopefully that's changed now.
Yes, it has.
And if I click in there, you should also be able to see me as well. I don't know how I'm going to work this one out. It's going to be a bit tricky if I had to do that for every single slide. Okay, we'll just keep going. So this one is for Flight Sergeant Peter Brown, who joined the Ancestors at the age of 96. Now, he was one of the last African IF World War II veterans. And this is quite a bittersweet. I mean, I don't know how to describe this one, really. I mean, of course, it's always a tragedy when we lose an ancestor, but initially he died alone. And so when he transitioned, there was no family that came forward towards him, or no nothing. And a small group of people, including the RAF, like and council officials, started coming together and said, look, we can't let him, go into the earth with no one around him. We need to give him a decent send-off. And so they organized one of these GoFundMe type of things, trying to raise the money. And I think it really worked, because they reached their target. And in a short space of time it's been running, they now have, from a funeral where no one was going to attend, it's now so, oversubscribed, they've had to relocate to a different location to accommodate everyone who's going to come to pay respects for him. So this is just to our elder, or late elder and now deceased ancestor, Sergeant Peter Brown. And he was born in Jamaica in 1926 when he came to the UK. I think it's in 1943. So he's what many people refer to as member of the Windrush generation. So we remember him too. I'm going to move on. I'm hoping that the slides are changing. They're not changing.
Yes.
They are changing. Great. Okay. I'm going to have to keep because I can't see anything. And so the next story, next we remember, is that of the Sharpeville Massacre. We're 63 years on, and it was the anniversary earlier this week, which coincides every single year with the annual remembrance as Human Rights Day, and the struggle against racism, essentially. So in 1960, sorry, 1960? Yeah, 1960, 69 people were murdered, 180 were wounded, and this was during a peaceful protest against apartheid-era pass laws. So we don't really talk about this much. You know, here, even when we was running Jens Upper, we try to always reflect on this as well. What I found interesting this year was actually seeing stories from papers in South Africa for Tanzania, saying that even though political parties tend to, attend and visit the site in remembrance of the massacre, what's happening is that survivors are saying that their hopes for a better life have been dashed because they're not seeing any resources going into the area. So even though people recognise as a site of mourning and a part of the history of the nation, that tangibly their lives are not actually changing, which is a bit of a problem. So yeah, we remember. I'm going to move on to the next section. You're watching myself, Sister Oleander, on Pan-African Community News Network. Yes, please, if you're there live with us, we should be on Facebook and YouTube. Remember, you can drop us a line to let us know that you can hear us okay, that we are going out live, that sound and visuals okay. But I'm going to keep moving on. And so the next story, which is, and let me see if I can get this working on my screen. Okay, well, the next section is UK politics. And the next section that we're going to talk about, let me see if I can get this working, and I had to give apologies. The next section is that of, and this is something we've seen before. This is the increasingly ridiculous and quite disrespectful situation of African politicians being completely misnamed by the national broadcaster, the BBC. So in this case, we've seen the Labour MP Florence Eshalomi being confused with her counterpart, which is the let me just try and find her name. I'm so sorry, I've got all the details in front of me. It was the shadow exchequer secretary Abena Obengasari. And she's the MP for Erith and Thamesmead. Now, the last time this happened, if I remember correctly, it was actually, I think it was Abena being mistaken for Dawn Butler. So there's something going wrong with the BBC News team where they keep on misrepresenting. This is the BBC Parliament channel this time, but they keep misrepresenting African MPs as if, well and behold, they seem to think that we all look alike. I don't know. But in this particular instance, they have apologized. They wrote to our sister Florence privately and said, like, we wish we hadn't done this. But she's actually come out and just said, well, to be honest, I'm not surprised. I'm just a bit disappointed as it's happened before. And the BBC keeps on doing this. It keeps on emailing its apologies. I mean, why do they keep mistaking me? And so she's just hoping that they actually, fix up essentially and stops doing this. So yeah, I'll move on to the next slide. And so the next story, like I said, please bear with me as I'm trying to change the slides because they're not all working as.
Sorry, Toyin, we've got a few comments.
Oh, okay.
So we have Afrithinker in Yikima. Says, greetings, Brother Toyin Agbetu.
Greetings,
and he also says, and also to your wife, thank you. Greetings to you. And then we have another one from Mr. the 4-3. He said, I don't have much nice to say about Kwasi Kwarteng, but when they mixed him up with somebody else on the cover of The Sun, I didn't know.
Oh dear. No, you're right. They can't help themselves. I remember that now. You're right. You know, I think it was a banker from, who was it? I'm not a fan, and I don't know all the capitalist heads. But you're right. It was a banker that they mixed him up with, and they just keep doing it. They, you know, they literally just cannot be bothered to take that extra bit. This is their job. This is their profession, and they're just continuously mixing us up. And yeah, I'm not a fan of Kwarteng, but you know, we'll probably chat about him a little bit later on in the program. Not for that long, we don't have to. But thank you, and it's good to have you there. And I'm glad that you can see us and hear us on screen. Now, like I said, please bear with me. We've got some technical gremlins, so it's going to be a bit clunky, me moving from slides and screen to screen. One of the screens isn't working, so you know. But we'll get through. So the next story, hopefully you can see on the screen, is that of our brother. Oh my God. Can you imagine Martin Ford? For one moment, I forgot his name. It's our brother Martin Ford. It's really funny because I'm actually not a fan of his after I had a discussion with him on reparations. And I think he was quite patronizing towards our community. But he has done some good work, especially his investigation into racism in the Labour Party. And what's happened is he's now come out and he's actually accused, all guns blazing, that accused Labour of not actually engaging with his claims that there's a hierarchy of racism. And he's correct. What's happened is that the investigative work that should have been done by the British mainstream media has actually ended up being done by Al Jazeera. And he did this research, finding that there were definite strands of Afrophobia in the Labour Party, not the Conservative Party, and Afrophobia. I mean, he doesn't say Afrophobia, he says anti-Black racism, but he's quite specific, it is Afrophobia. And he makes it very clear with evidence that it's not taken as seriously as anti-Semitism. And you know, we're not hearing nothing about this. It's, you know, his report was published last summer. It was around 140 pages. You know, he admitted, you know, he revealed bare how Labour Party was working. But yeah, clearly it's just not a priority to the current leadership, and that is very, very problematic as far as I'm concerned. Let me move on. Let's see if we can get a next slide. I don't know if it's changed. No, in my luck, it probably hasn't. So let me do that. Okay, and no, it hasn't. Okay, so the next slide. Okay, I'm just going to do it the old-fashioned way. You're going to see me turn here, turn in here. I'm just going to have to do it that way. This one is a very, very, very irritating story. Now, what's happened, I don't you know, I mean, despite all the merits and the good and the bad of it, the Home Office has been engaged in issuing grants to, you know, community organisations, not all community organisations, but some community organisations and other like charities, etc., to do work around the topic of Windrush. And with that work, what they're doing is kind of like raising awareness, and we know that they're not going to engage in any kind of reconciliatory work with communities. They're not interested in that, and you know. But you know what's happening now is that if that wasn't bad enough, and we've spoken about it over the last couple of months, is that they're decided not to award 150,000 worth of grants to Windrush community organisations if they found out that they've actually issued a tweet or put something on social media which is critical of the government. I mean, this is just so petty and so telling of the attitude of this government. So let's put it in context. In December, the civil servants actually approved applications from 15 organisations, and they all received about 10 grand each. And that's from, it's called the Windrush Community Engagement Fund. Now, you know, this was clearly established to deal with the citizenship scandals, they call it, in 2018. But now what's happened is that this new Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, and their private office are going around telling advisors that, look, because a couple of the groups have been expressing criticism of the Home Office, let's block their funding. And this is the problem when you bite the hand that feeds you. If you dance to the tune of the devil, don't be surprised if the devil acts like the devil. So essentially, they're not giving them their funding. I'm not excusing that behaviour. I'm not at all. I think it's completely outrageous. In fact, what I find even more despicable, though, and if we really check this, is that the amount of money that they're giving to these community organisations, which is £10,000, and they normally have to run their projects for around a year on that. yeah, so that £10,000. I don't know if you've seen the video led by Donkey that was released yesterday. So Led by Donkey did an investigation of the second jobs of MPs in Parliament, and they I think they, what was it? They looked at 20 Tory MPs and 2 Labours and 1 Liberal Democrat or something. They offered them a job with a fake company, and basically 5 Tory MPs responded back, and they came back and started saying, yeah, we'll do a job with you and stuff like that. And so they were asked, well, how much do you charge daily? And Kwasi Kwarteng, him and Matt Hancock both came up with the sum of their daily rate as being 10K, £10,000 a day is how much they charge for work. And they're expecting to do at least 6 sessions, 6 meetings. And Kwarteng was even expecting, to fly over to Korea, which is where the fake company said it will pretending it was based. And so it's really embarrassing. And Led by Donkeys, this campaign group, they're gonna leak bits of the video throughout the week, so you can see all the other stuff that they said they'd be doing. Now, what's happening is that nothing's illegal in what these MPs have done, but what it shows is that they put all their money, everything that they learn from government, all the contacts they have, is out for sale to anyone who's got the money. And the reason why it rang a bell in my head when I was learning about this story is because the £10,000 a day that these MPs are demanding from individual organisations, like private sector organisations, is the same £10,000 they're giving to a community organisation to actually help do engagement projects with what they term the Windrush community. So there's something not right about how they see money. The worth of one individual for one day's work is the same as a whole community organisation for a year. So I just wanted to share that with you. I mean, not everybody's going to agree with me, but it's just something to think about, that this is the space that we're currently in. You're watching the Pan-African Community News Network. Here, brother Dr. Toyin with Sister Oleander, and we're just going over some of the news.
Toyin, sorry, Toyin, I just wanted to say this is coming like a gagging order, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's the same thing that all these charlatans do, like Donald Trump with that woman, and
Daniels,
it's all the same thing. And it's like one hand that feeds you, but at the same time the other hand is behind their back, actually plotting.
Yeah,
against us.
But what we mustn't forget is that it's our money, right? So they're saying that a community organisation that's doing outreach work and engagement with those of us from our community who have been affected by the citizenship problems that this government has created can't have our money. They are deciding that because they're critiquing them and their gangster attitude. That, you're right, it's a gagging order. And unfortunately, what happens, it's the same thing like when schools were told that they can't teach critical race theory. And they didn't make it law in the end. It was Kenny Badenoch who introduced that. They didn't make it law, but they made it in the official guidance. And so I remember going to uni and in that week teaching critical race theory on purpose, because they were saying that. And I told my students, if you want to report me to the prevent team, because that's what they were saying, go ahead. But a lot of teachers in secondary schools, because it was guidance, even though it wasn't law, they stopped talking about critical race theory because they're petrified, they're frightened. And this is how this government works. This is how authority and abuse of authority works. This is what corruption looks like. And yet that Led by Donkeys expose, which is all over social media, you can hear how, Kwarteng, Hancock, I can't remember the other ones. Is it Graham Brady? How they've got no scruples, none whatsoever when it comes to just cream of the gravy chain. They just, take this cash, invoice people for 10K, just wax lyrical, give them all the contacts that they've earned while they're on the job, taking money from the public as public officers, and there's no challenge to that. Now I know Labour's going to say that the Starmer boy is going to change that and clean it all up, but he's part of the problem as well. Anyway, sorry about that. I'll move on to the next story, but yes, definitely a problem. Okay, we're going to move to policing matters. I'm hoping that the slides are changing. And the first story, let me see if I can get that working. Hopefully you can see a slide of our young brother on there, because I can't see anything at the moment. Sorry, let me, did it go backwards or? I have to really.
If it has changed, instead of each time, what I'll do is I'll tell you if there's a problem.
Okay, that's cool. Or in fact, what I might do, we might have to do it as in one of those presenters. I might say, next slide, please. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to help. So it has changed, you said, yeah?
Yeah.
Right, great. Okay. So I'm going to see if I can get this up and running on my screen as well. And there we go. So this is the story of our brother, Eldred Taylor Kamara. He's a young trainee solicitor, and he's spoken out now how he's been stopped and searched more than 5. I should say stopped and searched, maybe be precise. He's been stopped more than 5 times by police officers for looking suspicious on his way to visit a client who's in prison. Now, whenever he questions them, whenever he's been stopped and he's asking, why are you doing this for? They're saying that, well, you're looking lost on the way in something. So, you're looking a bit suspicious. So we need to see your ID. We need to know why you're on the way here. Now, he's been dressed in his suit, as you're seeing in this image here. But even despite that, he's still having to go through this indignation of being harassed by police officers on his journey to help his client. Now, our brother has complained to the British Transport Police, who are the ones who are doing this, but his complaint hasn't been upheld. The police forces argued that their officers behaved in an acceptable manner, and this is a response that our brother has just said is really disappointing. But it's just a reminder that no matter what your profession, no matter what you dress and how you think, it's like, you can still be stereotyped by officials in suits. And that's what's unfortunately taking place with our brother here. Let's hope that the fact that this story has come to light in the media means that they'll leave him and let him go. The next story is one about, well, this one's, we've spoken about our brother Dalian Atkinson, but it's about not him per se in this particular case, but it's about the woman who helped the police officer to abuse him. You see, she was in, they charged her. Sorry, my screens are just going crazy and it's so difficult to do this at the moment. I'm so sorry, I'm trying to multitask, and as you know, I'm not very good at that. So essentially, yes, she was in trial. The person who, I've forgotten his name, the officer who was responsible for killing him, was gone to jail, but she actually was found guilty of gross misconduct by the police, because she used an excess level of force and repeatedly hit our brother Dalian with a baton, but she wasn't kicked off the force. And this is the interesting thing about the story here. So her colleague went to jail, but the police have decided that even though she was part of that, just because she didn't hit the final blow, that she can still stay on the job. So she's been handed what you call a final written warning, but she can keep her job. Now it's quite difficult because there's 2 things. There's a trial that that said that she is guilty of this kind of thing, and there's a panel that decides whether she can keep her job or not. And so the panel has decided that she can keep her job with a final written warning. It's a hard one to resolve because I say it's a hard one. Is it really that hard? I mean, if you're engaged in a situation where your colleague, who is your former boyfriend, if I'm incorrect in this case, is beating a man who's on the floor and causes his death, and you're a police officer and you engage in that and it's unnecessary, then should you really be wearing a police uniform? Should you really be in charge or in situations where you might be called out to somebody who's vulnerable? I think the answer is no. I think the answer is no to that. And I'm a person who's kind of like, give people chances, etc., blah, 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 don't realize the gravity of what you're doing, blah, blah. But when someone dies because of your involvement inside a racist, harmful attack, like a vicious racist attack, there's something wrong here. But anyway, the family disappointed. They've made that clear. We'll see what happens. I think the pudding will come if her name is PC Mary Ellen Betley Smith, if she ever is involved in a crime in the future where she's actually charged with assaulting a member of the public. But is that what it's going to take for her to actually continue down the line? I don't know. And move to the next story. And this one is one that's been all over the media. It's the case of, oh, this is driving me insane trying to manage this. Sorry, this is the Casey report, and this has been the story that you probably couldn't have missed all over the media over the last few days. Now, the Casey report has been a long time coming. It was commissioned by the Met and I say the Met, also the Mayor of London, and this came as a series of high-profile failures and a lot of scandals that rocked the Metropolitan Police Force, and people just saying we can't trust it, even though we've been telling them that for ages. She looked into the institutional culture of the Metropolitan Police, and she concluded that it's riddled not just with racism but also sexism and homophobia. Now, it's a really powerful report. I've read the interim report. In fact, I read the interim report before it was published, so I haven't read the whole full report yet. But the interim report, it was difficult sleeping after that. Just the fact of hearing the level of abuse, the way the system is rigged against not just people, members of the public, but also those from our community who go into the police force and try to change the system from within. She gives, and this word forensic is often overused, but she goes into detail, giving examples and cases and numbers and statistics of situations of how the Metropolitan Police Force deliberately keeps its rotten apples, as they keep saying, keeps them in place, prevents them from being disciplined. And how, if you're of African or Asian heritage, any minority ethnic background in the police force, then you're more likely to be disciplined. And she again gives sections, names of policies that does so. So it's a really groundbreaking report in the way, way it exposes. I think it's more the way it exposes it as opposed to its big findings, because we know that the police is institutionally racist. We know the police is institutionally sexist. We know it's institutionally engaged in homophobia. We also know it's institutionally corrupt. And we know this not just because of our lived experience of it, but because there have been other reports. There's been much talk about the McPherson report. But the McPherson report and the term institutional racism was plagiarized by Kwame Ture. He is the leader of the Black Panther movement. He's the first person who came up with the term institutional racism. McPherson just borrowed it and used it and got all the credit for it. So we've known from the 60s at least we're institutionally racist. So it's good that this discussion is now occurring. If I start talking, and I should really, before I finish this, I shouldn't talk about institutional racism. I should also talk about institutional misogyny or sexism, because one of the things she says, which I tend to agree with, which is quite chilling, is that the ineptitude and the deliberate collusion of officers to protect, I'm talking about senior officers here, not just rank and file, senior officers to protect police members who are engaged in domestic abuse, sexual abuse, all kinds of attacks on women, is so bad that they've almost legalized sexual abuse. Because if you batter someone at home, you batter your partner as a man, the odds of you being arrested and convicted is so low because of the police ineptitude. I mean, there was a case in her report where women who had been raped had subjected themselves to the rape test kit, and it's a very intrusive process where they take the DNA after the incident and stuff, and they store it. And they put it inside a fridge, and then they process it for DNA, and they get suspects and compare it. Well, what happened was that in one case the fridge broke down and stuff, and they just didn't do anything about it. So all the rape kits that were inside there just spoiled and became useless. And there went the possibility of convictions of all these rapists. There are other cases like what's that one now? I read that, just turned my stomach. There was an officer who was looking at all the cases of abuse, child abuse, sexual abuse that came in, and taking note of their personal details. And then when he was off duty, calling up on and contacting them and all kinds of different things. So he was looking for female victims of abuse, just seeing where they live and stuff, so that he can start looking into forming relationships with them. I mean, it's a horrendous report. And you'd think the police would just kind of eat some humble pie. You'd think that the commissioner Mark Rowley would just say, you know what, I accept the findings that we're institutional racist. In fact, he does accept the findings. To his credit, he does accept the findings. He doesn't shirk back, and he's probably doing the best piece of work in the Met by hunting down rogue officers and bringing them, you know, to justice than any commissioner I've seen in my lifetime. And I mean, I really, really mean that. But the fact that he won't use the word institutional because of some ideological reason, and is now backed up by the Home Office, is, I don't even want to use the word disappointing. It's just short-sighted, because you cannot rebuild trust in a corrupt, rotten institution like the police if you are not prepared to recognize the scale of the issue. And to do that, you have to bite some bullets. And it doesn't matter how much work he's doing. It's like, you know, he's inherited leadership of one of the most toxic institutions. And even though people are saying that the police needs reform, that's just peeing me off, because the police doesn't need reform, it needs transformation. One of the suggestions is that it's split up, it's too big. It deals with national issues like terrorism and you know, issues to do with national security. The specialist firearms unit, in which Sarah Everard's murderer Wayne Couzens and also that serial rapist David Carrick served, all needs to be kind of like, you know, I won't say dismantled, but it needs to be completely redone. Everyone needs to be revetted. It just needs a new approach. And that approach has to be so radical that it's essentially a transformation of the force. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think that within 2 weeks, all this discussion about the police being institutionally racist, sexist, and homophobic is just going to die down. And people will just move on to the next topic. And that will be a shame. That'll be disgusting. And that'll be partly because Crowley didn't do the grown-up thing and just accept the term that his institution that he's presiding over is rotten. And even though there might be some good officers in there, and everyone knows there'll be good officers in there, everyone knows that it's not every police officer that's involved in this, but institutionally, and that's what this report shows, that the policies and the processes, you know, that deliver these outcomes are caked into the system, and they cannot be reformed. They need to be transformed.
And just one comment I was going to make. The fact that I still hear people talking about the problems are from a few bad apples. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Yeah. It's embedded within the DNA of the police, as far as I'm concerned, and that is institutional racism and all the other isms that they're failing, really, really badly failing on.
Well, Casey, to her credit, talked about that. She says that, you know, she's really critical of this idea that it's just a few bad apples that the police keep saying. She says that the senior Met officers shouldn't be doing that. They shouldn't be saying that, you know, because it's so obvious the failures that they have, the crimes that are perpetrated by, you know, serving Met officers, not just rookies, but you know, it's obvious. And what's happening, because they keep saying it's a few bad apples, they're not engaging with the police processes, the policies. I know it's the boring, nerdy stuff that I'm more engaged in, but they're not looking at it. How are they getting through? How are they not being vetted? They're not accepting the fact that by being the nature of being a police force, it's going to attract some people who want to do good in society, and it's going to attract people who just want to have that authority and engage in some badness in society. And they're just not dealing with it. You know, it's almost impossible to get rid of a bad officer, as we saw with the other case, with Dalian Atkinson's case, where the panel actually said that she can still stay in the force despite what she did. Now, I'm not privy to her exact actions in that case. I just know that she hit Dalian 3 times, and hitting him 3 times with a baton while he was down on the ground, is that enough to fire someone? I think on the balance, because he lost his life, it's yes, but I don't know. And I'm always, you know, I don't know. I haven't seen all the evidence, but that's part of the problem, right? That you have a culture that protects itself. Now, let's move on to another case. And this one is a story about a Met officer who's asked his colleagues, why don't you go back to your own country? Now, this is one of the things I say that I do credit the Metropolitan Police Commissioner for, because what he is doing is that when he can, he is getting rid of these officers. I mean, you know, there's not much more for me to say on this particular story, but he was fired after making these appalling discriminatory comments towards African officers on his team. The police did launch an investigation. His name was Toby Causwell, and the misconduct panel did find that he acted in a way that mocked and belittled officers between 2019 and 2021. But you see, as much as I'm happy with the outcome in that, I see this as low-hanging fruit. I think that, 2019 to 2021 is a couple of years. I suspect that he must be a junior officer. I don't know, but I'm suspecting that, he might not be, because they said that he had a team. But this is kind of like more engaging in identity politics. And it's, don't get me wrong, it's good that they got rid of him, because if he's carrying out those attitudes and displaying those attitudes with his colleagues, who he's supposed to have their backs, then how was he dealing with people on the street?
But you know what, Toyin? I'm sorry, but for me, that's an easy win.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's easy.
It's just, but the previous story you just told, that police officer, to me, the gravity of this whole story, it's just not balanced. And I just think it's just ridiculous that, don't get me wrong, of course, the person should have been sacked. But for me, more so, the person previous, this policewoman who...
involved in the death.
Yeah. Anyway.
And this is the problem. How can you not commend the fact that someone who's just clearly racist and has been racist for 2 years, who's been humiliating and mocking officers on the basis of their ethnic background, is fired? You can't say no. But what's happening is, I call it, this is like naughty word policing. This is the heart of identity politics. That's what this government and the opposition has reduced Britain to. And so I'm not saying that this person shouldn't be fired, but you're right. What about those who are kind of like dismissing cases of domestic violence, dismissing cases of institutionalized racism and use of force against children of African heritage, of Afrophobia? All those little things, policies and processes where they sneak in, for me, they're the ones that you need to get. They're the ones who need to get fired. What about their supervisors who are tolerating this culture and in the groups? So yeah, the language is an indicator of badness. So if somebody can be blatant enough to speak like this in public and talk to other people like that, then great. Yeah, they're not fit to be in public office, that. But for me, it's the ones who are also very silent, and their actions and their misdeeds are causing the problems. And those are the ones that we're not seeing. We're seeing the obvious ones. But we'll see. We'll see how long this purge that Crawley's on survives and how long it lasts. So, but thank you for saying that, because I do hear that. But it's difficult, right? Because you don't want to say, don't get rid of these ones as well. But this is kind of like what gets resentment up, because officers will say, but he just said a naughty word. He was just a bit rough and tough with the language, a bit of banter. That's what they'll use. But these, this is a tip of the iceberg as far as I'm concerned. There are many who don't say anything that are far worse. Okay, so this story is, it's, I don't have enough information to give all the details on here. I have read what's in the media and stuff like that, but I suppose I'll just have to report it just as it appears on face value. And it's the story that came out last week on Twitter, when a mother shared a video of her 15-year-old son who was being sat on by civilian security staff. Now, not only did they sit on them, but apparently they handcuffed him as well. Now, he's 15 years of age. This took place in Superdrug, which is a chemist in Chichester, on Wednesday. Now, the mother is saying that he was slam dunked to the floor. That he was handcuffed by 2 men in uniform after they followed him and his friend around into the shop. And the clip's very short. You can't really see what's going on, etc. Other than force being used. I don't want to get into the murkiness of it. I don't know. The story is saying that there was a violent altercation. They don't know if it's between him and the boy, or the boy and the member of the staff, etc. And that's an issue in itself. The fact that 15-year-old is being treated like a big man. You know what I mean? But the reason, so I hesitated about sharing this, but one of the reasons why I felt I had to share this is because the men who tuckered into the floor, and if the reports are correct, put him in handcuffs, weren't police officers. They're what have been described in the media as rangers who are employed by the local business improvement district. And this worries me, because they act independent from local authority. They act independent from the police. They're just individuals in uniforms, carrying handcuffs, rough handling our children. With what authority? So I don't know what happened. I don't know, there's just something, there's an alarm bell going off in the back of my head that this is a 15-year-old boy being manhandled. I mean, that to me, this reminded me of Rashawn Charles, to be honest with you. But that was a police officer, and that resulted in our young son's death. So this 15-year-old boy is still alive. I mean, he was locked up. They wouldn't tell his mother where he was. So I think it was like 24, 48 hours before she got to find out where he was, etc. But we need to keep an eye on these kind of developments where we're seeing Charles Bronson-like vigilante groups. I don't care whether they're paid by businessmen, but but they're not paid by the public purse, because who are they accountable to? So, I mean, I don't know how I would respond if I found out that two men. No, actually, I do know how to respond. If there's something off with this, I'm not happy about police officers putting hands on our children, let alone deputized, what do they call this? Rangers. Anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. You're watching the Pan-African Community News Network. I'm here with Sister Oleander and Brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu. Wow, we're always at 8 o'clock. I'm going to try and wrap this up really quickly. We're halfway through the program. I'll try and make some pace. Please bear with us with the few gremlins we have technology-wise. We'll try and repair that. Well, we can't repair it as we're going, because we're live, but just we'll try and make it as smooth as possible. We should be live on Facebook and YouTube. So if you want to comment, you want to ask a question, please feel free to do so. It's your program. Yeah, let's keep going. So we're going to go through general news as it affects us. And now we have covered this story. This is the story of Laura. It's just gone from my screen. I'm telling you, this is driving me. I cannot access. I can't see the screen. I'm so sorry about this. There we go. Let me do it again. And hopefully, it probably just looks like a blank screen to you. That's right. Okay. So this is a story of Laura Javalen, who actually quit the BBC to campaign for or on the topic of reparative justice for the Caribbean. And we have spoken about this at the last program, so I'm not going to go through all of it again. She was a BBC journalist. We found out her family had been enslaved in the enslavement of over 1,000 African people. She has made a financial contribution, in reparative justice of around £100,000. I know people are, and I've seen the comments that some people are like, well, her family got far more than that, blah, blah, blah. It's worth millions now, blah, blah, blah. 100,000 is chicken feed, blah, 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 blah. And I hear that, but that's not really where I'm coming from on this one. My point is that actually it marks her as an exemplar. I don't like the idea of her being the voice of reparations, which is how the mainstream media is starting to shift it towards. That's absolute complete stupidity. But what she is doing is a good example for other, descendants of enslavers who have lived off the profits. And she's going to go around the world talking about how the legacy of her ancestors has directly benefited her, and that is only a good thing. I mean, that's an amazing thing. So she's quitting her job with the BBC, like I said, to do this as a full, like a roving, full-time advocate on the campaign to secure financial reparations for the Caribbean. I don't think it's just financial reparations. I think it's much more than that. That's the inclusive part of it. But this is the story. It's a good one. There is a video. I started watching the video. It did irritate me a bit, not because of what she was doing, but just the language. She kept on saying that my family owned 1,000, slaves. Yeah, we owned 1,000 slaves. We owed 1,000 slaves. 1,000 slaves we owned. And I know this might seem like me being pedantic about language, but no, your family didn't own 1,000 slaves because you can't own human beings. What you did was that you enslaved, exploited, and held captive 1,000 African people. And the language is different, because actually when someone talks in the language of ownership, like a capitalist, it kind of boosts their ego. It asserts that they had power, legitimate power. Ownership is has this sense of legitimacy towards it, even though she's doing the right thing. But I don't want to bring her down. I'm just making the point that we have to be careful about the language that we allow to be used when talking about our ancestors and our history. Her family didn't own 1,000 slaves. They enslaved thousands of Africans and exploited them and held them captive on their forced labor camps. Let me move on. Oh gosh, yeah. Every time I see that woman's face, it does make me vex. So this, as you probably know, is the current Home Secretary. Her name is Suella Braverman. And this is a really new story. It's only come out. I saw it last night. Not much I can say about it. Well, this actually part of it's not new. Well, let me start again. So what's come out is a story that she's saying that, or her office is saying that any asylum seeker that complains about the conditions in the prisons that they've been held in, because they are essentially prisons as far as I'm concerned. Well, they're not all prisons, some of them are hotels, but I'll get onto that. They're going to be threatened with deportation to Rwanda. And this is because there've been reports done. There's one most recently by the charity Refuge Action, and it's interviewed at least 100 asylum seekers, that's adults and families all together, in London, Manchester, West Midlands, Bradford. But what it says is that on top of being told not to complain about the poor conditions or face refusal to Rwanda, that asylum seekers can't even complain about the quality of food. They can't even take pictures. If they complain about the quality of food, the police can be called on them. It's a really draconian climate that they're living under. You'd think that they've done something bad, right? The approach is the way they're talking about them as if they're criminals. They're asylum seekers, but they're being treated like they're lower than like they're subhuman. The thing I was talking about last night that I saw coming, which was a report I think I saw on CNN, is that there's now talk that from tomorrow onwards, that the government is trying to push through new plans to move all migrants, all asylum seekers that are currently being held in hotels because there's no spaces for them. They're going to take them out of the hotels and put them on military bases and empty ferries. These are asylum seekers. These are migrants. These are families. They've done nothing wrong. They're people who are fleeing conflict zones. They're vulnerable human beings. But this government has now not only kind of like, going to put them into prisons, essentially military bases, into floating ferries. But you see, there's another part of me that doesn't really want to labour this point, because that's part of their job, right? They want us. They want people like myself who think about the human rights of others, who think about them living with dignity, to get outraged, so that people hear that Britain is the wrong place to come to. That if you come to Britain and you get caught, they're going to treat you like this, so don't come to Britain. And that's part of what they want. But it does say something about the despicable nature and the inhumane approach of a government that can actually come up with these ideas, doesn't it? The illusion of inclusion. There's this Suella Braverman, Rishi Sunak, Kerry Badnock. There's Priti Patel. All of them. They're just disgusting human beings. Where to next? Now, all of that makes this particular story a little bit contentious, and I say it's contentious just simply because people won't have sympathy for our brother in this story. So this is the case of Richard Wallace. Now, Richard Wallace was wrongly classed as Jamaican and deported after serving a sentence in jail, despite having been born in London. So you might be thinking, okay, so he sentenced in jail, but what's the point? What's the problem there? I don't get it. Well, you see, he was in jail for murder, and because he was in jail for murder, he's done his time. Okay. What's happened is that the government has deported him to Jamaica, and he's now fighting. He's he's launching action against them, because forget the rights and wrongs about the crime. He did his time for that. He was born in Paddington. He was born in London. He is part, or his parents are part of that Winchester generation who came in the 50s. And so, it's easy to think that, because they deported him, and, he argued it was mistaken identity, and he had to prove that he wasn't who they said there was. And they found out, they got DNA, and they brought him back and stuff, and all those kind of things. But now he's been accused of having his fraudulent passport, and he was jailed again, blah, 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 blah. The point is that, again, we're seeing a situation of an African whose legal rights, human rights, are being deprived. The reason why this is important to share, just like the other one with the marshals, whatever they call themselves, the deputies, the people who were ganging up on that 15-year-old boy. The reason why this is important to share is because here's a man who was actually born in London. Yes, he's gone to prison. Yes, he was involved in the most heinous of crimes, and I get it. Right? He murdered someone. He did his time. But to have him deported to Jamaica, somewhere he's never lived, he didn't grow up there. There's something inherently wrong with that. It's like the Shemana Begum case. And what we're seeing behind closed doors, I don't know if any of you have heard the story, because this, until it came through from the researchers, and thank you for sharing this with me, I was completely oblivious to this. One of the things that it makes you realize is that he has British nationality, but he's been deported to Jamaica, where his parents come from. So map that onto you, those of you who are born here in the UK. So some of you will be like, hi, I was born here in London, in Hackney. Now, of course, I'm not a murderer. Well, what happens if I say something against the government? Well, how does it work out that actually they could deport me to Nigeria against my will? Even though in the fact that I was born here. What's happening now? The Winchester situation was supposed to be resolved, so it can never happen again. That's not what's taking place. These little cases where law has been broken by lawmakers. And I'm not going to talk about the Boris thing that happened this week, but we're seeing that there's something in the air which we had to be mindful of. And this story is one of those stories that kind of highlights that. Okay, the next story is a continuation of a theme that we've spoken about before in the past, and this is one where Cambridge College is to create a fellowship to examine its links to British slavery. And there seems to be a lot.
Sorry, Toyin, can I just, there's just a couple of comments. Afrithinker says, thanks. And Mr. the 4-3 says, well, this raised, for the previous slide, this raises questions for me as somebody of Jamaican Ghanaian descent.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, both of you, for giving the feedback. It does. It's something we just turn a blind eye to and we don't think about. And because he is a murderer, essentially. I mean, that's what they would call him. He did this. I don't know the ins and outs of his crime. I don't know if it's self-defense. I don't know what it was, but he murdered someone. He's not a sympathetic person that people will follow the case and talk about and learn about. And people might get caught up on that and just ignore it, but you need to think deeper than that. You need to think, what does that mean?
Yeah. So Mr. the 4-3 says, well, what this says to him is that in the eyes of the government, being a British citizen is a privilege, not a right. Yeah,
I think it even goes deeper than that. I think it's going back to the place of ethno-nationalism. And it's really bizarre because it means that even though the gangsters, in Parliament, and I'm talking about the ones from minority ethnic backgrounds in the UK, so the Patels, the Africans, the Asians who are in the Conservative Party right now enacting these laws, are sitting sweet. They are presiding over changes that if a European parliamentarian was to do it, we would be outraged. This is the problem when you have the illusion of inclusion, right? You can have politicians that look like you who can do the most racist things and people will give them a little bit of a slide. Well, if it was someone else, they would be outraged towards it. And I think this is saying that to be British, you had to have European heritage. This is what it comes down to, essentially, that anyone we can visibly say does not look how the stereotype of what Britishness is or Englishness is, we can deport. We can ship them away. And that's quite scary. That's something that people should be angry about and keep aware of and fight against with everything. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'll keep an eye on that story, certainly. But, you know, I'll be interested in hearing any more developments on that kind of case. What's happening behind closed doors? While we're dealing with the cost of life crisis, a lot of stuff is going on behind our door. There's nothing, what's that saying about there's nothing more dangerous than a cornered dog? Right now, the Tory party has nothing to lose because it knows that it's unpopular and it thinks, I'm not even sure that the Labour government will beat it in the next general election, but it thinks it will lose. And so what it's setting up is the most outrageous racist policies to set a trap for the Labour Party to keep saying that, you know, they want the Labour Party to go against something so they can create this culture war storm around identity politics and call them like this woke government. And Starmer Boy is actually just saying, nope. Yeah, we would do the same thing. Yep, we would do the same thing as well. Yep, we would do. And I believe him. I believe that he's the same as those Ginal. Anyway, thank you. Let's move on. So yes, so this is a story of Cambridge College creating fellowships, 600 safe links. They're going to come in the form of fees and bequests for students and you know, investments by the college. You know, letting students from the Caribbean come in. They're going to create a fellowship which follows the university's legacies of enslavement inquiry. This is that report and stuff that took place in 2019, 2020. They're also going to be looking into, what was it? They're going to be looking into people from the college who fought against enslavement as well. So they're going to look at it both sides. So I think the focus is mostly on how do they profit from it and what can they do to repair it, but they're also going to try and find these other stories. So we're going to probably hear a lot about abolition as well. You know, it is what it is. I can't knock them for doing this. You know, more colleges need to do this. It seems like it's flavor of the week. Oh yes, and talking about flavor of the week again, we have a story. This one snuck under the radar. The 23rd of March is traditionally the day that the United Nations likes to chat about enslavement because they link it to the actions of Wilberforce, which is why I don't do the 23rd of March. But the Mayor of London does, and so Sadiq Khan has promised that he's going to donate or raise or commit's the word, isn't it? Commit 500,000, £500,000 to develop a memorial in the Docklands, that's West India. Key to recognise the city's role in British slavery. I say British slavery because they keep using the term slave trade. And so we're going to have a monument to a slave trade, which is like its business, this stupid morality deficit thing that they keep doing. It's the role in British slavery. And it's good, because the West Indian Keys is home to many buildings, warehouses, which is used to receive the products of our ancestors' enslavement, which is sugar. They're one of the only remaining buildings of their kind in London. So it's important to do this. It's also where the Museum of London Docklands is based. And they have an exhibition, I say an exhibition, it's a permanent gallery called Sugar and Slavery, which deals and addresses with this. So let's see how it goes. I saw some footage and some tweets on the social media, so some poetry, a lot of talk, a lot of dignitaries, etc., waxing lyrical about how they care and mustn't forget this kind of thing. I think Professor David Olusoga, my brother, said the memorial will help Londoners better remember the victims of slavery. So, it's a good thing. And of course, there's a lot of detractors, the usual rabid racists, and I'm not even going to repeat some of the stupidness that they say. It's good that this is taking place. I find it really interesting that this was part of a project from diversity in the cultural realm. That's the thing that I was part of. That's the thing that I was a commissioner for. So this would have been something I would have led on. And as you know, I would have done it differently. But hey, at least the work is still going forward. Not quite the way I would have liked to do it. Let's see if the money materializes. Let's see if the memorial is truly representative. I still think, anyway, let me leave it there because it's a sale point for me. I don't really like talking about it, especially with the Ford report exposing how this hierarchy of racism, which is the reason that everything blew up, which is what I commented on, is actually real. So everything I said is real, and everyone knows it's real now. And they knew it was real at the time. Let me move on. So this one is this is the output of a report. Well, I say the report by the ONS, which is the Office for National Statistics, and they expose the tragic situation that African people residing in England and Wales are 3 times more likely to live in social housing. I don't think that's much of a surprise to many of you here watching, but I think what's interesting is seeing how the figures correlate. So you know, I think that works out to around 44% of us are living in social housing, but the equivalent for Europeans is 16%. What I found very interesting is that for the traveller community, so people they used to call gypsy or Irish travellers, people with those backgrounds, it's around the same number, 44%. So there's discrimination on a multi-ethnic level. So those of us with African heritage is 44%. Within the group that people racialize as white, there's another group at 44%. But when they asked the question, who's more likely to live in the houses that they owned, this is where the lick is, 68% of people of European heritage answered yes, they own their home. So it's quite scary if you look at those figures. They were followed closely by the Asian community, who was at 61%. Now, you know, like I said, this is not really new news. I think the reason why we need to think about these kind of things is because this is indicative of our, not just our social standing. That's not really the issue. It's about our well-being. Those people who don't own their own homes are likely to have poor life outcomes. They're likely to have poor health outcomes. You know, everything tends to work against them materially wise. They don't have the assets to kind of secure their futures in the way they would like to. They're more at risk of living in places where you have things like mold, where the young boy Aquab lost his life. I read a story about, what was it? This was a really weird one. Let me get this right. There was a 2-bedroom flat, and the landlord had leased it out to 18 people, paying £400 a month to him. And so they were rotating, living in this 2-bedroom flat. And then there was a fire. And I think one person died. But that's how they found out about what the landlord was doing. That's what's taking place in London right now. Yeah, people with property are not all of them, obviously, that's just ridiculous, but people with property with no scruples and no moral centre are raking it in and living a life of Riley. While those of us who worked all our lives and are here and don't have such assets, we're still living in precarity. No matter how secure we think we are, most of us are still one wage packet away from being in poverty. And poverty should clearly not exist in a place like the UK, which is one of the wealthiest nations on the planet. But here we are with poverty. People talk about food banks. So this is why the story was important. It's very statistical based, but it's important to know these things. The next story is a good news one. I don't have a good news section this week, so I mean, you're going to have to grab it where you hear it. And this one is about a community centre in Leicester, which has been which has been handed back to a local community group for £1 a year rent. So what we call a peppercorn rent. Now, this is, I say this is good news because this is Leicester's African Caribbean Centre. They've been there for years, been providing services for the community for years. It was a struggle, but the council gave them a 60 grand grant, and from that, the council's going to help pay for the running cost during the first year of its lease. They're going to take care of maintenance, day-to-day running costs of the building, and also, pay this peppercorn rent of £1 a year. And the people in the area are thankful, because a lot of the times it's community centres like this one that is doing the work, which is looking after those most vulnerable communities, providing social spaces, providing food, providing resources for children. This is amazing. And the reason why, I say the reason why, one of the reasons this story really gets to me is because it reminds me of what we had in Hackney with Centerprise, where Centerprise had a peppercorn rent, and we lost that building. And so it's nice to hear that there are still some councils, some people in the UK that recognise that when it comes down to community assets, and I think this was done, this shifting of ownership was done through one of these community asset programs. They made the case, the community made the case, a business case for how they were going to sustain the building, and they got it. It just touches my heart, because we don't have anything like this in Hackney anymore. And even though I'm a director of the IDPED Centre, and I have some partners with some amazing skill sets, we don't. The work that needs to be done is taking too long. And I think, it's one of the problems when you have too many people who are busy, too many hands who are in leadership. You sometimes just need people who just want to get on the floor and just do the work. Do you know what I mean? Just get their hands dirty and do it. And that's the sort of thing that I'm into. That's what this group's into. And I think it's amazing that they've done this. And I should say that the fund that the council gave them was actually from their Black Lives Matter funds. So the council had its own Black Lives Matter fund to help with these kind of projects. I didn't even know that Leicester had that. So there's something right going up in Leicester, and perhaps that I need to drive down there one day and just have a sit down and reason with the people up there, because it's a good news story. You're watching myself, Brother Dr. Toyin Agbetu. I'm here with Sister Oleander, Pan-African Community News Programs. A few more slides. We're just going over the stories from the last couple of weeks. The next section is what we call UK Health, and on this I'm going to start talking about some of the probably unsurprising issues that we're finding, not just in the police through cases reporting institutional racism, sexism and homophobia, but now, and not just the NHS, when we've spoken a lot about some of the racism that takes place in the NHS, but now we're also looking at the East of England Ambulance Service. That's the EAST. Now, there's been a report which has highlighted that members of the East of England Ambulance Service NHS Trust, I hate acronyms, but that's what it stands for, kind of like, sorry, let me start from again. So this trust had an investigation into it by an organisation, external organisation that specialises in EDI work. There's 120 members of African and minority ethnic communities who were asked and contacted. 50 of them gave responses out of the 120, so it's half. Out of everyone who took part in the survey, 60% of them said they did not believe that opportunities to advance the career progressions were equally available to all staff. So they were doing all the work, everything that they thought was right, but despite that, they didn't think that they were going to have any chance of career progression. The good thing is that, no, I don't know if I'll start with a good thing. Let me go backwards. So the report showed that what was happening inside the ambulance service was that people were coming to fancy dress parties using blackface. That stupid thing where they put polish on everything. They thought this was funny. They were making monkey sounds at work. I don't even remember the story of Christopher Older when he was on the floor. BBC screened it nationally, and they were making monkey noises as he lost his life and died in police custody. And they were even laughing at colleagues who were unable to eat during Ramadan. So we're talking about all manners of Afrophobia, Islamophobia. I mean, everything going on inside there. So that's what's taking place inside this ambulance service. I've never had my eye on a ball for ambulance service unless it's dealing with sickle cell. But this is what's happening to our colleagues inside these spaces. So the case report doesn't just talk about the Met. The Casey report should really be looking at, we should be thinking about having an overhaul of all institutions that have this level of authority. Anyway, I say good news. It's not good news. I suppose it's symbolically good news. Is that a chief executive? His name is Tom Albell, has actually personally decided to meet with all the members of the network, the minority ethnic staff in that organization, and actually apologized. I mean, it's good he's apologized. I don't know whether it's going to be followed up with actions. I haven't heard anything about that. But this is the case in the ambulance service. It gets fatiguing. It's very tiring repeating all of this.
Toyin, there's a comment from Ammo.
Oh, please. Yes, yeah.
And it says, interestingly, thought the Labour Party has barred 16 Leicester councillors for standing in the next local council elections. I'm aware some will be Asian, but I'm not sure if any are African.
That is a really good point. I didn't think about that link. Thank you for that, because that story came out last week, wasn't it? Because Labour, Keir Starmer made a comment about the smell of weed impacting on people's lives. It was one of those coded racist things. I mean, I haven't heard the whole speech, but that's what it came across as. Well, that's how it was reported on social media. And that story about him deselecting these councillors who have been selected by the community themselves quickly came up in the news and vanished without anyone saying. And the people who had been selected, right, and thank you, Sister Emma, was Labour, was African and Asian candidates. Like I said, we're not in a situation where Britain is operating as a legitimate democracy. There is no opposition. There is no choice when it comes to political leadership. What we have, and I think the only time we have any kind of space and any kind of control or any kind of influence is if we deal with our councillors. It's when we engage in local politics. That's where we are right now. I'm not saying that we concede that the national game is out of our control, but we have to be honest and say that whilst many people in the Asian community and many, and several, not many, many with Africans with continental heritage have made gains in the political sphere, the rest of us have regressed, and we don't have that seat at the national level. I've noticed who was it? It was Brother Kunle is now part of what is he? He's a commissioner now for the Equality and Human Rights Commission. I didn't even see that happening. Kemi Badenoch behind closed doors has been appointing people who look like us into that space. And I get on with Brother Kunle, but our politics are completely world apart. He is a conservative. And that's what they're doing. While we're not watching these sly little moves with policy and decisions, they're putting in place all the pawns to control things in a way that works against our interests. And I don't do Labour. I mean, I'm not left or right. I'm just people. I just care about people. And because we're in a situation where the UK politics has regressed to such a state that people accept this kind of banditry. So if you think about what's happening in France right now in France, the people are taking to the streets and they're pushing back hard. That's what should be happening in this country. They're in France right now. Macron is trying to push through pension reforms because it will save them a lot of money. And the people are just saying, no, none. And they are fighting. And it's a bizarre scenario where you have the left and the right. So you have the racists plus the socialists in France uniting to push back against this, saying that you can't do this. You're not acting democratically. But that's what's taking place in France. None of that is happening here. None of it. I mean, you have small pockets stand up to racism doing their bit. There was a protest outside Downing Street when Netanyahu, the right-wing, anti-human rights, he's almost like a monster. I don't like using those terms, but his infringement on Palestinian rights is disgusting. You had some protests taking place, but I didn't see it on the news. It's like, these little protests aren't doing anything. And anyway, I've gone off track. We had to keep our eye on the ball. Thank you for letting me know about it, or reminding me about the Leicester councillors who've been barred by Labour in opposition. I mean, that's just outrageous. So they can select who represents that space. The reason why I went off on that is because if we can't elect those councillors ourselves, and it's the councillors I suspect who made that decision for that community centre, then what happens is that the people that Starman will put in place will do the same thing that the Home Office did with the Windrush organisations. If you speak out against the government or you speak out against those in power, you won't get the funding, you won't get your community centre. And that is not democracy. Well, that's not democracy in its holistic sense. Let me deal with this story. In fact, I'm going to rush through this story because it makes me sick. Okay, so this is the story of Ikwe Madu. He's a Nigerian politician. It's the shame. I mean, his wife. I read the whole story, but I can't relate it. It's just too bad. Basically, that's what the children do. Basically, I told him off for doing that. Okay, what he did. I'm smiling because I can't even deal with this one. Him and his wife, he had a kidney problem, and it was serious. And so they found someone in Nigeria, someone working in the markets, paid him, like a few £1,000s, and then brought him to London. Had a private operation, changed his kidney, saved his life. That's it. Realised that this was a lucrative idea. His daughter has a kidney problem, so they went back to Nigeria, found someone else, offered them money, brought them over, and wanted to use their organs for their daughter. They got caught because the person found out what was happening. They didn't really understand the implications of giving away their kidney. And so this is the first case of, I think they call it modern slavery or some kind of, how they like to use these terms and stuff like that. So they've been convicted of trying to conspire to exploit this man for his kidney. And it is one of the first cases to be passed under this. But this exploitation of our own people by our own people, that's the case. You know what? I'm not gonna. Yeah, some people. This is what happens. It just makes me angry. I'm being honest with you. It makes me angry. But when people are vulnerable, they do anything for money. But the story goes into more detail. You can find it online and read it if you want to, but you don't need to. You just need to know that they were harvesting the organs. People were alive. They weren't dying when they took the kidneys out and stuff like that. But it was just such an inhumane, abusive ploy. The operation cost, I think, like 60 grand. They were giving them 7 grand. So you might argue, well, they made a decision. They're going to sell their organ for 7 grand. Who are we to interfere with all this kind of process? If that's what they want, that's what they choose. But people don't always know what these things mean. They don't know the implications of these kind of things. They did know. And what happened? It was the lies that they took photos, in restaurants together to prove he was family, but he wasn't family. It was just deceptive. It was so deceitful. It was so immoral. And that's that story. Let me move on. This is a story about. So that one still bugs me. There's wickedness in all people. That's what I'm going to say. Just never play that game that some activists do, where we pretend that we are virtuous and we have no sins and no flaws and we haven't got work to do. All groups of people are capable of evil and wickedness, but that's not what we're talking about today. So this is a conference that dealt with maternal health care. It's a group that was organised by some African women who said that they were not listened to by health care professionals, and recognising that failure to take their concerns in was a contributing factor to deaths and poor outcomes. It was organised by a group called the Motherhood Group, and it was arranged to highlight the racial inequality in maternal health care and the disparity in maternal mortality between European and other African and other minority ethnic groups. Now, the group was put together by Sandra Igwe, who founded the group. It's now an NGO in 2016 after the traumatic birth of her daughter. So just want to big them up, really. I suppose it's not good news, it's just an announcement. Just we see you, we respect you, and it's again, it's just one of those things where it feels like we have to go through something. We have to go through some trauma, some pain, and then we're always still having to reinvent or create institutions to cover us, even though we are taxpayers, even though we donate, and even though our blood and sweat of our ancestors and ourselves now have made this nation what it is. So, big up to the sisters involved in this, and thank you for sharing. The next story is one just as an awareness. It's about prostate cancer and the risk, just to tell you that, don't take our eye off the ball. So, of course, there are issues that women face when it comes to maternity health, but we also have to recognize that African men, 1 in 4 African men, are at risk from this. And so the Errol McKellar Foundation, he's my uncle actually, are organizing a walk and a talk, one of these 5K charity walk things, to raise awareness about prostate cancer and to purchase a mobile unit to help testing. So I just thought I'd share that. Statistics you probably know is that if you are age 45 or over, and your risk increases as you get older. If your father or if your brother has had it, or if you're overweight or you're obese, you're at a higher risk of being diagnosed with prostate cancer. And if you don't look at it and diagnose it earlier, that's an aggressive form of cancer, which is more likely to spread. And so, please, if you're not sure, get checked out. And that's it. This is taking place, this event's taking place on the 30th of April between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. at Gladstone Park. Well done, Uncle Errol. It's good to hear that you're still doing the work. What's the next story? Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm not going to say much on this. I give thanks to our research team who decided to include it. What can I say? It happened 16 years ago. Martha Remembrance, some big mouth that you're probably familiar with, decided to make the views of some grassroots community activists, and in fact, not just activists, just the grassroots community, the Pan-African community, clear to a national audience. And then that message went international. I think it's tomorrow. I should say tomorrow. As usual, I'll take my walk down to Westminster Abbey, pour libation around, what was it, 11:30? I think it's 11:30. You should know this. I'm there every year. Pour libation tomorrow. Thank you for sharing it. I wouldn't have really said anything about it, but I suppose I've got to stop doing that. I should even share my voice when I'm talking because I'm blushing. So thank you. I think that's the last story. There's going to be an event at UCL on the 1st of Saturday. That's Amplified Voices. I'm organising with Hackney Accountants, young people. So you're also welcome to attend there. You can find the event on Eventbrite and just putting that self down on the register. It'll be good just to let the young people have elders listen to their concerns and stuff. I said they're organising it. I'm hosting it, so I'm opening up the building and getting the funding and stuff like that. But they're actually organising the event. So it's the 1st of April, next Saturday, from I think it's 11 till 5. There'll be lunch provided, and it's just a group. Hackney Account that we're working with a group from Italy who also does the kind of work that Legale used to do. They'll be sharing, and a lot of youth organisations in East London will be talking and sharing and providing workshops. So if you're interested in hearing things from the perspective of young people, you're welcome to turn up. Just register on Eventbrite so we can kind of have an idea of numbers.
So Toyin, it's this Saturday, not next Saturday.
Did I say next? Oh yeah, of course, because it's Sunday now, right?
So it's this Saturday coming. Yeah.
Thank you, honey. Yes, so this Saturday coming, 1st of April. Yeah, cool. Thank you. And I think that's about it, really. We've reached the end. Thank you for being with me as we struggle with a few little technical glitches. Let me try and get that. Yep, thank you. Bear with me. Thank everyone for, usual, our research team for sharing the news stories and information, putting everything together, admin team, our Legali supporters and community, those of you who make donations, thank you. We're still trying to do our thing here. Still a lot to do. It was really odd. I almost missed it today. It wasn't in my diary, and I completely forgot that actually one of the things I said we're going to do is during the break times, the school break time. I'm trying to keep my sanity because I'm working like 3 jobs, it feels like, at once. So during the break times, school break times, that there won't be a program, and we'll start back during the break times. I know that sounds weird, but that's how it works. So actually, term time finished on Friday, so I shouldn't have done this program, but because I didn't announce it, I've still done it. So hopefully it was useful. I hope you appreciate that. I appreciate you, all of you out there. Thank you for joining us and supporting us and being there. So we won't be back in 2 weeks' time. I think the next term starts at the end of April. So we'll be back, I think it's around the 30th of April. So it's the first Sunday, I think, of the new term or something. I can't remember exactly. No, 30th of April. Is it April or is it March? Oh, God, you know what, Toyin? You can tell how tired I am, right? Is it 30th of April? Yeah, I think the new term starts in...
Yes, it will be April.
Is it the 30th of April?
Mm.
Thank you, honey. That's sufficient. So the 30th of April, I think, is the next scheduled program, which is when the term starts. And we're going to synchronize the programs so they happen at term time, university school time, blah, blah, blah. So whatever you do, please try and take a break over this Easter period. I won't say holiday, because if you're like me, then a lot of us are still working during these breaks. But whatever you do, please try and take some rest. And I will try and stop being a hypocrite and make sure I do the same. It's not easy, but I will try, at least even if it's just for a few days. I might see some of you tomorrow. I know that we have a mix. Sometimes there's a few of you, sometimes there's 1 or 2 of you, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to be there. But either way, I know that you're there with us in spirit. Thank you. Sister Oleander, I don't know if you want to say anything before we wrap up.
No, just to say that every year that we come back to this anniversary of the 27th is always a reminder that we still have so much work to do, and that we haven't got there yet. So it is a big reminder for me.
It is. That was the thing. I'm hoping for the day when we have a grip. Oh God, I don't even like using that term. See, what's happened is that the Labour Party have used that term grip. Party has to get a grip, and so because they keep using it, I just don't want to use it. It irritates me. But
it's also the name of a suitcase.
Well, that's how we use it colloquially. I mean, yeah. But we do need to get a handle on what's happening right now for our children who are coming up, because I'm seeing at these events, like when I saw that slavery event at the museum, I noticed there's a next generation of young activists there that City Hall was dealing with. I didn't know any of them, and I thought that was really sweet. I thought it was really good, because I thought it's good that we've passed the baton on. Next generation is taking place. They're engaging in arts and politics and stuff like that. But because we're not there as well, what's happened is that I think they're being manipulated. I think that they're going to fall into the same pitfalls. We're not communicating lessons well enough to the next generation, and that's really worrying to me. And I still want to sit down and write a book and make some films that explain these kind of things, but we need to do better as a people. I mean, what's happening is that they're running roughshod over us. But let's stay positive. Thank you, everyone.
Sorry, 1 second. We got a last comment. Thank you both for all your hard work. You are sorely needed.
Oh, thank you. It's really nice to hear that. It's really nice to be appreciated. We know, I know that I'm a little bit toxic for some people. I am how I am, and I'm not really going to change and apologize for it. So it's nice to know that just sharing this little bit of news and just keeping everyone up to date. And again, it's not just me. It's everyone behind the scenes who are assisting with this. That is appreciated. That means the world to us. So please
give thanks.
Give thanks. Please, take care. Just Oleander, you want to say anything before I head out?
Not just everybody walk good, and stay safe.
Yeah, likewise. And as ever, I'll say, May the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. All good. Ashe.
Ashe.